I am going to just, for ratification, put those decisions and recommendations on the table. Number one, the point was made at the retreat that members were unanimous in their resolve that the oversight by the Public Administrations and Appropriations Committee had been and continues to be critical to good governance, and at no time did anyone express a desire for it to be discontinued. The second recommendation that came out of the retreat was that the committee would be asking for a review of the standing orders of Parliament to allow for specific regulations to govern the sessional committees. In the discussion there, we did realize that there were differences of opinion in how the standing orders treated with sessional and select committees, and the recommendation was made that we would refer this to the Speaker of the House, the Leader of Government Business, the President of the Senate, the Prime Minister, Opposition Leader, for this to be addressed at the Standing Orders Committee. The third decision that we made was that information may be requested of invitees by all members at any point in time, but that the questions must be made through the committee clerk, and that these requests would be shared with all members of the committee. And number 4 was that we had set an agenda, but that issues of public interest that arose time to time, that the committee would put those on the agenda, and that these would be approved by the committee as a whole prior to the review. Those are the critical decisions that came out of the committee retreat. The schedule was revised, the agenda, schedule agenda for the meetings, and just for ratification, members, today we, as I indicated, will be meeting with the agencies from the Ministry of Sports. The next week, we will be meeting with representatives of the Jamaica International Financial Services Authority and the Jamaica Special Economic Zone Authority will be coming next week. The following week, the 21st is a break. Yes. On the 21st, the committee had indicated there will be no meeting on the 21st. The following meeting will be with the National Water Commission, Rural Water, and the Water Resource Authority. And then after that, we will follow with the National Housing Trust and the Housing Agency of Jamaica. And time permitted, we'll move in probably in the new year, in the new calendar year, to dealing with the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development. One of the issues in the retreat, which was critical to members, was the fact that when we meet with the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development, we had determined that at one of those meetings, or at that meeting, we would also invite to attend, just for a portion of the meeting, representatives from the National Works Agency. The reason for that, members, is that we want to get a clear picture of what the road policy is, because you have NWA roads, mostly the main roads, and then you have the parochial roads, which go with the Ministry of Local Government. As it is now, most of the funding, if not all, is going to the National Works Agency. The problem is that many of us, especially the rural members of parliament, we're having real challenges with our parochial roads, and the Ministry of Local Government says they have no funds. So it is for us to look at the overall road policy, and we are going to do that with the Works Agency in conjunction with local government. That is the agenda for the next few months. There is a matter rising that members indicated that we will ask the secretary to the committee to write, to look into, and that has to do with the outstanding traffic tickets. We had been informed that there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of outstanding tickets, and we weren't certain how that is going to be resolved. One of the mandates of this committee is efficiency of government, and it was recognized that there are a number of ministries involved, and we just wanted to know what the dynamics and how it's intended to clear it up. So the clerk has been asked to get a report. It is going to involve the ministries of justice with the court system, the Ministry of National Security, the Transport Authority, Island Revenue, etc., etc. So we're going to write to all the affected agencies, get a brief on it, and then members, based on how the agenda, how the schedule unfolds, we will invite them to one of the meetings in the near future to have a discussion on that. Based on the retreat, one of the things came out that at the last meeting, in our deliberations, we had indicated that we were going to ask the clerk to write the Attorney General's chambers and ask for an opinion on the standing orders and how the standing orders affected the operations of the committee. Out of the deliberations, the retreat last week, a decision was taken by the committee that, based on the fact that we have resolved the operational issues and the fact that we'll make the recommendations to the standing orders committee, that it was no longer required for us to seek a legal opinion from the Attorney General's chambers. Members, with regards to the retreat, I think those are the most important points that came out of the retreat. I just ask for ratification. If there's anything that I have forgotten, if there's anything that is important that needs to be brought to the table, is there anything that members would like to, or is that a faithful representation of the retreat? If so, all right, members, I just want to now quickly move to at the retreat, we also considered the report to the ministry, the report on our deliberations with the Ministry of Science and Technology and the Office of the Prime Minister with regards to energy. There were a number of recommendations. We members had sent this out to all members. We had made some specific changes. I would like us, in tabling the report, I think it's important for us to just go through the recommendations quickly before they're tabled so that members are that we can have agreement and to indicate if there's any further recommendations or if there's any change to the recommendations as it stands. So if members would allow me, I'll move just quickly and just read through their 6 recommendations. And these will be tabled as a fulsome report next week in Parliament. The first recommendation was to improve the accountability of the agency heads and boards of directors. The Office of the Cabinet and the Ministry of Finance and Public Sector should establish clear and consistent guidelines which, while reaffirming ministerial authority over agencies, will more actively include permanent sectors and central ministries in the information loop and oversight of related agencies. These guidelines should include having the permanent sector or his or her nominees sitting on all agency boards of directors, empowering central ministries to carry out random mini audits of agencies, establishing rules for the frequency of board meetings and the submission of management reports, and establishing rules for the contents of such reports, which should include all major employment and expenditure decisions and updates on major projects. If members will remember, this came out of the fact that during our deliberations, too often we saw when questions were put to the permanent sectors, they were saying that they were not informed, they don't sit on the boards, they didn't have direct oversight. We as members felt that we always have known the permanent sectors to be the accountable officer, and as such they must be given the power to exercise that accountability, and that there needs to be a revision or a look at the governance structures in place to ensure that they have a appropriate position so that in future can be held accountable for, or at least are in the information loop of what is happening. Number 2, all newly appointed ministers, CEOs and heads of departments should receive training. I think maybe training or instruction may be a better word, in Government of Jamaica procurement guidelines within 60 days of their appointments, and the burden will be on them to bring themselves up to speed, as ignorance should be no excuse for violations of GOJ procurement rules. Ministries, departments, and agencies engaged in over $1 billion of procurement annually should employ designated, qualified, and appropriately trained procurement officers to prepare documents and make necessary submissions and reports to oversight entities and generally lead on procurement matters. That was number 2. Number 3, to reduce allegations of unfair dismissals and the costliness of such settlements, qualified management staff who are not known political appointees should not be dismissed except for cause during periods of change of government. Boards of directors, for their part, should refrain from signing new contracts for management staff or offering contract extensions for more than 1 year during an election year, so as not to unduly constrain the freedom of action of a newly elected government. Number 4, to improve ongoing parliamentary oversight of public expenditure, the PAAC should develop procedures to more routinely monitor the role that project and program expenditure above 15% of approved expenditure requires renewed parliamentary approval. That was an important point that came out of the retreat, but I'm not certain that it says. The point that was made that any project or program that had over a 15% overrun over budgeted expenditure, there must be some mechanism to trigger that back to the oversight committees. And so our feeling was that in government, the Ministry of Finance, the ministries have their policies, they have their programs, and they have their projects. There's a budget for them. Where there's this overrun of in excess of 15% was the figure that we had indicated here, that really must be reported to the permanent secretaries because there is an overrun, that the Ministry of Finance should have somebody that collects that information so that they know those projects that are, for want of a better word, in trouble, but that it must be, information must be sent in a regular report, whether it is quarterly or otherwise, to Parliament. Now, the PAAC, as the body that provides oversight, what we would do is we give us an opportunity to look through those projects or programs that are having these overruns and indicate whether or not we determine the need to look into them if we don't get a appropriate explanation. So that's number 4. Sorry, that was part of number 4. Just to finish number 4, we also indicated that the Ministry of Finance and Public Service should install project management software and other mechanisms that can monitor project implementation across all MDAs and agencies experiencing or anticipating significant cost overruns on projects. Should be required to submit a change of expenditure form, including the justification, to the Ministry of Finance and Public Service and the PAAC for relaying to Parliament. That would now allow us, having gotten that information, to then send it on to the Parliament so that there's openness and transparency in these operations. Number 5, since a central premise in the correction and rehabilitation of offenders is that they be reintegrated in society in productive ways, the Cabinet Office and the Ministry of Finance and Public Service should develop and provide guidelines to MDAs regarding the situations and the levels within the public sector in which ex-offenders could be employed. Employment application forms for all MDAs should include questions on previous convictions, but ex-offenders whose records have been expunged would not be required to state their previous convictions. The point was that we had indicated that we thought that there were certain positions that would require persons to indicate if they had prior convictions and others that do not. Those that do, there has to be a clear situation, there has to be a clear decision as to which ones do and which ones do not, and that it must be included on the application forms for those positions. And the point was clearly made that this did not apply to persons who had their records expunged. Number 6, unless there are notable obstacles, projects that have commenced and already incurred significant expenditures should be prioritized for completions before newer ones are started. Those were the recommendations to Parliament. I will say to members, we did have a discussion about where we did find that there were breaches, that there must be some where persons or boards had made questionable judgments, that there must be some recommendations as to how that is held accountable. But we did not go forward with that as a recommendation. So these are the recommendations tabled in the report. The full body of the report will be there. I encourage ministers to read it again, and it's the intention, if approved, to table the report next week, Tuesday, in Parliament. Member Lily?
Just quickly, I don't remember if in terms of the expunge, we had made a recommendation that it would have been certain cases or all cases.
Of what?
Of criminal offense. I
No.
don't remember if I was hearing right at the retreat that it would have been in certain cases, or if it was in regard to finance, and I think I was hearing something else, that whether it is expunged or not, those persons should not be placed in those institutions anymore.
I think
so I need to get some clarity on that.
Yes, I think the philosophical idea that we had was that there must be, I think, sort of natural justice allows persons having, even committed an offense, a certain period of time passes, that there must be some rehabilitation. We agree with that the Ministry of Finance and the Cabinet Office should develop a paper that speaks to it, that there must be some positions which, within the request for it, given the sensitivity of those positions, the criminal, if a person has criminal records, it should be divulged. I suspect that, and then we had said, and if it was expunged, it would not be necessary. But I think the point that we're making here is that I don't think that it is a remit of our committee to indicate the details of it. What we would like is we're going to recommend to Parliament that the Ministry of Finance and the Cabinet Office develop a procedure, develop a schedule of regulations that treats with this and how they deal with employment in the public sector, and it can be referred back to us, and then we look at the details and have that discussion. But I think the expertise resides in there, in the ministry and the agencies, so they can look at it and send something. But we believe that there needs to be a very specific group of rules that deals with this, so that everybody, the public in general, we as parliamentarians, government in its general sense, knows exactly what the rules are, because it seems to be a little bit vague as it is now. Microphone, please.
I want to prolong this conversation, but I don't remember if I heard right, and that's why, it was not captured in your recommendations in regards to the sensitivity of certain job description or certain responsibility in regards to the expunging. And that's why I was asking if that was said. I'm not too certain.
Well, yes, we did have a discussion. The general sentiment was that if persons had their records expunged, then it would not be required. But again, we would really want the input of the Cabinet Office and the Ministry, simply because I suspect that if one of those jobs was, say, the Governor of the Bank of Jamaica, whether it's expunged or not, it may be a necessary requirement. So we're not, I think, right, we're not able to make the actual decisions as to what, but we're going to request of Parliament and the Cabinet that this request go to the Finance and Cabinet Office to come back to us with the details. All right, so members, if there are no objections, if everyone agrees to this, I will table this report will be tabled on Tuesday at the Parliament. All in favor? All right, so members, I'm going to now invite the Ministry of Sport. Sorry, we had asked for the Sports Development Foundation, the Anti-Doping Commission, GC Foster and the Institute of Sports to come. I know members got the information late. We had indicated last week that we understood that would be so, but I think members wanted to just get a general concept of what's going on. And so we'll ask them to just give us their overviews, and then members can ask general questions. Member
GC Foster coming today.
Oh, sorry.
I believe
we had
fell under the
exempted.
Ministry of Education.
Yes, absolutely. You're correct. Sports Development Foundation, Institute of Sport, and Jamaica Anti-Doping Commission. Morning, Mr. Thorpe. The head of the delegation.
Yes, morning, Chairman. Yes.
Morning. Welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Thorpe, you have with you today the SDF, Institute of Sport, and the Anti-Doping Commission.
That's correct, Chairman.
What I would suggest, how we could probably do it, is I would allow you to introduce the senior members of your team from the ministry, and certainly maybe the heads of the agencies. If you have some comments, overview, I would invite you to do that at that point. Right. Then we would take it in the order given. You could turn over to the principals of the SDF Institute and the Commission, and they can introduce the members of their team relevant at that point. And similarly, we would invite them to give an overview. Information came in very late because the request was made late, but members recognize that, and I think we just wanted a better understanding of the situation, and we'll take it from there. So with that, I turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Chairman. Morning, members, committee clerks. With me today from the ministry are Mrs. Tracy Lindsay, Senior Director, Corporate and Liaison Services. Beside her is Mrs. Kimberly Brown Edwards. She's the Finance and Accounts Manager. We also have Mrs. Florette Blackwood. She's our consultant on sport development and innovation. And specific for the area, we're here about Mrs. Suzette Eisen. She is the acting director, senior director for sports and monitoring. And we also have Mrs. Dion Blair, the director of sports policy development. Okay. Now to my right, Mrs. June Spence Jarrett, and she is the executive director for JADCO. So I just want to make that clear because members might know her from somewhere else. Right. To my left is Mr. Renardo Smith, and he's the interim executive director for InSports. And to my far left, Mr. Denzel Wilkes, the other Denzel on the team, and he's the head of the SDF. I'd quickly point out that, like myself, Mrs. Spence Jarrett and Mr. Smith are fairly new to the portfolio areas. So, of course, we're a bit young, but we have prepared ourselves to respond to any of the questions that the members have. By way of opening remarks, my opening remarks is just to introduce the team, indicate that we continue to do the work that has been assigned. For some of us, we are still learning the ropes, but we are prepared to respond to any questions that the members may have. And I hand over now to Mrs. Spence Jarrett to introduce her team.
Well, we were going to take the. You want to start?
Oh, you want to go in the order? Okay, right.
Yeah,
so I'll start with the SDF because that's the team there. So that's the team that you said you wanted first. So Mr. Wills can introduce.
Just from the agenda.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, members. Morning, colleagues. My name is Denzel Wilkes. I've been introduced. I'm General Manager, Sports Development Foundation. I first of all want to apologize for the absence of our financial controller, who is ill and unable to be here. She would have been here absolutely otherwise. But with me is our chief engineer, Mr. Terry Montague, over to my left here. And that basically constitutes the team from the SDF that is here this morning.
Okay. All right. Well, just to start, I think members, just to start the ball rolling, what we'd like is that if you could give us an overview. The SDF receives funding from the lottery via Chase, is my understanding. There was a point at which it was 10%, moved to 7.5%. I think for us as members, we'd like to know what is the basic revenue, the situation now, and secondly, there was a policy in place where you would do infrastructure work, which would branch out across the island, so that there was a impact. And the times past, there was members of parliament and others would see SDF actively working out there, and another percentage that would go to the national associations. I think at the time there was a 60-40. So, but now we don't necessarily see as much infrastructure work taking place, and we're not certain. So I think maybe an overview of your funding and how you utilize it would be a good start for us.
Thanks, Chairman. The SDF, as I think most of us would be aware, is fundamentally responsible for, as you have stated, infrastructure, sporting infrastructure development, and the support of the national sporting organizations. Those are the two main responsibilities. Within that, we also assist as much as possible the athletes themselves, those who are at the level of national representation. In terms of funding, yes, the funding has historically come from the gaming industry. In more recent times, it has been through the Chase Fund, and we receive 40% of what is generated based on the cess that is taken from Chase, and the rest goes to those other letters that make up the Chase acronym. Sports, yes, is the largest beneficiary of all the others at an individual level, but it's 40%. Recently, there has been a little bit of what I would couch as uncertainty, in the sense that while we continue to receive from the gaming industry the funds now actually pass through the consolidated fund. And having gone to the consolidated fund, it then goes back to Chase and comes to us. We remain a bit
So it goes from gaming to console fund,
yes,
then to Chase, then to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We remain somewhat uncertain as to whether or not we will continue in the medium to long term to receive precisely 40%. And in fact, in preparing our budget this year, we have, based on the advisement that we have received, not calculated based on our projections of what 40% would be, but we have essentially prepared a budget based on what our needs are. And those needs comprise mainly requests that we have had for infrastructure development and requests from the national sporting organizations, as well as, of course, administrative expenses, etc. You mentioned, Mr. Chairman, the issue of infrastructure, and yes, there's always been an...
No, but before you go further,
Sure.
though, you still haven't said how much.
Oh, that 40% for the last probably 4 years has amounted to within a range of between $550 million and $600 million.
That's a fair amount of money.
A fair amount. I would agree, sir.
Just for clarity,
Yes.
Chase, when it was first started,
Yes, sir.
there was a 10% of the gaming industry, of lottery at the time, which was just lottery was the only one,
Yes.
went to SDF.
Yeah.
It was then changed to 7.5. You have now, it's now changed over to 40% of the amalgam because it's a much
Yes.
broader industry.
Yes.
You said this would have been changed some years ago.
Yeah, the calculations, I know. Of course, there are many more games now.
But yes, so would you say that this would have worked out to what it was initially envisaged? What was then 10% of lottery? I mean, you have not had a serious fall off in income during a period of time. It has remained somewhat consistent and growing.
In nominal terms, yes. But of course, that 10% of which you speak at that time, 100% of that entire amount went to the Sports Development Foundation.
Yeah.
As the calculations changed and as the gaming grew, the percentage take fell, but the total amount increased. And then the determination was made that it should be spread beyond just sports to include culture, etc.
Right. So, but what I'm saying is the amount that goes to sports has remained relatively.
If you go back in nominal terms, you'll see 100 and something million, 200 and something million coming along. But in real terms, it has remained fairly
About
steady.
the same. Good. All right. So you were about 550 to 600 million. Right?
Yes.
So how do you give? How much goes now to infrastructure?
Right.
How much goes to the national associations?
I can tell you in the past, certainly up to 2017, we would be spending on infrastructure specifically in the vicinity of 130 to 140 million dollars.
130 to 140.
Yes.
But so you're spending less than a quarter, or less than a quarter, or thereabouts, 25%.
Right. And then you would have your national associations picking up somewhere in the vicinity of $150 million.
150.
Yes.
So what happened to the other 250?
Sorry? No, I'm going to go through and basically indicate the areas, the main areas of expenditure.
Yeah.
Because administrative expenses would pan out at somewhere in the vicinity of if you allow me, I just get to the accounts, and that is what the problem when you don't have your financial controller with you. But essentially, you have administrative expenses, then you have expenditure on other projects which are not infrastructure, and I'll outline what those are. For example, there are 2 track meets that are held, staged nationally during the year. These are the Racers and the Jamaica International. And I can tell you that those are supported and have been supported to a fairly significant extent.
Like about how much?
In the past year, each one received the equivalent of $100,000 US.
That would be, so 100,000 US.
Right, and I'm coming around. Yeah, I'm coming back to the associations because I mentioned $150 million.
Yeah, but that works out to about 25 million.
Yes, yes. Now, when I mentioned the associations, that they receive $150 million, that is specifically in what we call subvention. Because outside of that, they get that divided up and they get it on a monthly basis. Outside of that now, each association, based on when they are traveling to participate in competition or when they are hosting competitions here or specific challenges that they may have, there is a sum that is set aside to assist them as far as that is concerned. And so you will have, for example, well over $200 million in any year that actually goes to the associations, but it's $150 million that is in specific monthly disbursed subvention.
I'll ask you there a little bit.
All right.
Yeah, just repeat that. I'm not certain.
The national associations receive funding
you said about 150 million.
In 2 forms. Each association gets a specific amount per month. And the total subvention that goes to the 40 associations that we now fund comes up to approximately $150 million.
Okay.
Outside of that, each association submits a budget indicating their main activities for the year. For example, the football team will have to travel to participate in various competitions. The netball team will have a World Cup in any particular year. The Olympics in any particular year.
So that's another 100?
That's an additional amount. That could easily run you another 100, depending on the particular year. In an Olympic year, for example, in a year when it's the World Cup or the year before the World Cup, the Football World Cup, because it is in the year immediately before the World Cup that you have the most traveling and the participation in the various tournaments. And that goes for all the associations at different levels. Of course, some of them, I mean, it's not as expensive. You have your gymnastics, you have your table tennis, you have your rifle shooting.
So I'm just saying, if you have about 130 to 140 million that goes to infrastructure.
Yes.
Let's just put 250 to sporting associations.
Yes.
All right, so if you said 150 and 250, that's 400.
Yes.
All right, so there's 150.
Yes.
Left.
And of course you do come around to the matter of administration, basically.
Well, I know that should not be close to 150. That could be over
that's nowhere close. In fact, I can tell you off the cuff that we have managed to keep our admin expenses in the vicinity of anywhere between 10 and 14% consistently of our overall cost. We monitor it on a regular basis.
Administration is so. Well, how much would that be, though?
What you mean?
Yeah, you're talking. If so your administration is somewhere in the medium of 75,000.
Huh?
75 million.
No. In the
well, I'm sorry, my maths.
Between 10 and 15%.
The budget is 550. They have 550 million to 600 million. So 10% of that would be 55 or 60 million. 15% would take you close to 90 or 100. I'm just saying.
Well, I gave you a range over the years. I gave you a range that.
No, but I'm just saying that's pretty high, though.
high if you compare it to other entities.
No, but what? Yeah, but I'm not cutting. It would be good if you. It's easy to give us a sort of breakdown. I don't think we need to go into it. It just, sounds high. But we could get a breakdown of the admin expenses. I mean, normally it's not, but we can move on if you have them, fine.
I can give you some specific figures for 2017.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Microphone. We're not hearing you.
Our obligation is to look at the current. So perhaps.
I think he's just doing it as give us a general idea.
No, but he would have budgeted.
For now.
For
this
year.
He did indicate that his finance person is not here, so we can give some latitude.
But the bald figures would be there as to what provision would have been made for administration during the current year.
Which is what
Okay. Which really do you want me to go
just
now?
give us an idea. I mean, we're not really, we can get it otherwise, but I think just as a...
Sure. I was going to just indicate that for 2017, in terms of what we spent on the associations, that amounted to just under $190 million. It should be noted that we also contribute to a few other organizations that are government sport-related organizations. At that time, we were still making a small contribution to the G.C. Foster College, a contribution to the Institute of Sports, which has continued. The G.C. Foster has been discontinued. Independence Park has continued, and the Social Development Commission, which has also been discontinued.
So you give money to each of them?
Yes, we give them they as part of the subventions.
Oh, great. Right.
And that amounted to, for 2017, approximately $50 million.
That's a significant amount.
For them.
Yes. Okay. And the admin costs, you said?
I'm sorry?
The admin cost.
The admin costs. I'm coming around to that. If you just give me a little while, I will find that, sir. Our administrative expenses, and I'm going to give you an actual figure to the end of September for 2018, because this is actually up to date as to where we are, amounts to $46.2 million. And one can extrapolate as to what that would work out to in terms of for the year.
So the majority of
so
these
you're talking about
salaries,
$62 million approximately. I can give you the breakout, some of the major items.
for the year?
Yes. I could tell you what the major items are in terms of year to date. Of course, our admin cost includes everything from advertising to audit fees, depreciation, all of these things. It's not just a matter of just salaries and all of that. I can tell you what our salaries figure looks like if you so desire, sir.
No, I don't think we have to. Okay. All right. So I think what would be interesting to us, I mean, just as members, the infrastructure that you're doing this year.
Sure.
I'd be particularly interested in anything in the western side of the island, but I know there are others that have. Yes, I know others we'd all like to know the infrastructure projects you're doing this year.
I can give you an idea of which projects we are currently implementing.
Sure.
Sure. For you, could you say how you determine the priorities for implementation of these infrastructure projects.
Yes, yes. Okay. As a preface to that, what I do is to say how the requests come, because we try to initiate where it is appropriate, but for the most part we get requests. We get requests from community organizations, we get requests from political representatives, and we get quite a number of requests from schools in particular. In terms of the determination, once a request comes in, our project team goes out, looks at the potential area of location, determines whether or not it is appropriate, and develops an estimate. We have two subcommittees of the board which then look at these requests. In terms of what they do to determine what is appropriate, we provide advice as to, for example, where a particular facility, for example, a football field or a multipurpose court is to be located. We are going to be looking at the kind of population density. We are going to be looking at, for example, are there other such facilities in close proximity? And we are going to be looking at the whole issue of appropriateness. In the case of fields, for example, we have to take cognizance of the availability of water, because a field that is built without water being available, and I'm talking about non-National Water Commission water, is going to be destined for failure if you do not have access to water. It's almost impossible to pay the NWC for water to be able to properly maintain a field. So those are some of the major considerations that go into making a determination. Of course, the most fundamental consideration is affordability, in terms of how do you spread the limited funds that are available, making sure that there's a balance in terms of how you distribute sporting facilities across the country.
Chairman, just going forward, just quickly. Is this going forward? Because I am certain I've been around for a little while and I've not seen anything in terms of any community development that I can point to say it is coming out of your agency. So I would really like to know if this proposal is going forward or it is something that has been ongoing. And if that is so, I would love because I don't see anything in my area, I would be very happy to know where it is taking place.
I thought,
no,
you want me to respond?
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. We have done so many community development projects of various sorts. Multi-purpose courts, which are courts that result in the playing of netball, basketball, and volleyball.
Microphone, please. Mike.
I'm sorry?
I would prefer, Mr. Chairman, if these things could be documented, because it is very important to me, because sporting is a vehicle in which you can use to develop community. If we are really serious about human capital, especially to bring communities together. And I personally have a passion where that is concerned. And I've always been saying, what is happening in terms of the Sport Development Foundation to really go out there and deal with community, really start developing community so that the communities can come together in order that they will be able to deal with even disputes.
We don't take on the responsibility of bringing the community together, but we provide the facilities. And the facilities have been, when it comes to multi-purpose courts, the country, I can say, is literally littered with multi-purpose courts that we have built. And I can name numerous communities. For example, one close to, just behind the Dintil High School, there's one which was built there sometime in 2017. We are in Majesty Gardens. We have done some in the Denham Town area. We have just completed one over in Montego Bay Farm Heights. We have them throughout in fact, we have concentrated in recent times as part of the intervention program in doing a number of these in some of the more sensitive communities. And I can provide the list for the member without any difficulty whatsoever.
All right. Member, sure.
Chairman, as a newly elected member of Parliament, I must say that I'm a little bit more privileged than member daily, because just recently I approached SDF, Mr. Wilkes, Mr. Modique, who are here, and currently, as we speak, work has started on a play field in the Alligator Pond community in my constituency, and I really want to commend and thank the SDF.
Just as a question, that is funded through SDF?
Through the SDF. I said Mr. Wilkes and Mr. Modique and the other technical persons have visited. We have had meetings with them, and that is something that I'm really happy about. My question, though, has to do with the Reggae Girls. They have qualified for the World Cup.
Mr. Chairman, on a point of order, sir. On a point of order.
Okay, yes.
Are we not here to look at the budget of SDF and how we can advise them of any concern as it relates to their spending? But I realize that we're going off track by trying to find out where and when. I suspect that is for another meeting.
I don't understand you. Where and when what? No, I'm not certain what you. Where and when
saying
what?
That the meeting, the PAC meeting, is to look at the budget of.
Yes, so I'm trying to understand what you're.
But I'm listening to my colleagues, and that's not what we're doing.
I really don't understand. Well, you want to explain? Maybe
Mr.
I'm
Chairman,
the only one who doesn't. In terms of what?
Mr. Chairman, the point of order that I'm raising is very clear. We, as the PAC, we are here to look at the budget that they have submitted and how fine. But I'm listening to my colleagues, and that's not where we are.
No,
so I'm asking,
but with due respect, though, I mean, and you're a new member, so I'm trying to understand. What exactly are you taking umbrage on?
I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, I too could glowingly paint a picture of the assistant, but that's not what we're really here for.
Oh, no, yes, but please, I think we're a bit edgy. Can we, look, members are speaking on point, and I think that if he is doing some work on infrastructure and has commended them, I think that's a positive. Is that what
Mr.
you're talking
Chairman,
about?
sir, with all due respect, we are not edgy. And if we sit here and I listen to Mr. Wilkes speaking of the different areas that his agency has assisted, if all of us is to glowingly pay tribute, we are not going to leave here today, and we're not going to get to the budget.
You want me to tell you why I think it is so important? Quite frankly, I'm happy to hear what Mr. Stewart says, because I have not, please hold on, I have not necessarily seen, certainly in my estimation, projects. Now, I'm happy to hear you had a project, and you heard the question I asked specifically. Is it a project that you had requested and was funded? Because I would just say to you, I have had a number of discussions. I have not necessarily been able, maybe through bad luck, to get a project funded through SDF. So it is good to know. I think what we need to do is work out what the procedures are and how they deal with. And you, as a member of Parliament, I thought you would be very interested in that as well.
Mr. Chairman, sir, again with all due respect, Mr. Wilkes spoke about all that they have been doing. For you to say to me now that you're happy to hear from Mr. Stewart is throwing something on it to say as if you're not believing what the agent head is saying to us.
No, please.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, sir.
No, Mr. Clark, please don't, I know you're new to the committee, but we don't have to have, to discuss each and every point in that manner. I think the point, what we're trying to work out here, and what is clear, no, Mr. Clark, far more than the budget is the policy that governs it. The bottom line is, Mr. Clark, have you made a request of SCF?
That's exactly what I was saying to you, Mr. Chairman. I could speak about farmites. He mentioned farmites.
All right.
Farmites is mine, but that's not what we are here about.
I'm making a point to you. I'm making a point to you, Mr. Clark, that all of us in here and the wider Jamaica want to know how the determination of these things are made. It is a policy, and therefore it is our job to indicate how it is done. So I am happy, quite frankly, Mr. Wilkes is here. I have had a number of discussions about basketball courts. In every one that I have done, it has been fully funded out of CDF. So I think that it is important to indicate to me what is the policy that guides that.
And I'm agreeing with you, Mr. Chairman. What is the policy? But we are not asking those questions.
All right.
That's not what we're doing,
Mr.
sir.
Clark. All right, Mr.
And
Clark.
please, sir, not because I'm new to the committee means that I don't understand what is happening.
All right, Mr. Clark. So, Mr. Wilkes, I think where we're getting at, there are two issues. One has to do with infrastructure, and I'm going to come back to that. But there was a second part you were indicating.
Yes, Chairman. I wanted also to find out, since the funds are now directly channeled into the consolidated fund, is there an issue with the timing that you get your allotment of funds? And the second one, is there a set amount of funds that will be going towards the regular girls now that they have qualified for the World Cup?
Thank you, sir. We are not having a timing problem in terms of funding. We receive our funds on a monthly basis, and in fact, it's a little smoother now because previous to now, the Chase Fund would withhold 10% of what was due to us, and we would get it basically 13 months later. That has stopped since it's going through the consolidated fund, and so we get the entire amount that is actually due on a monthly basis now. I can give an indication as to what we have been receiving in recent times. It's a little unpredictable, but we have been receiving on a monthly basis approximately $53 million for the last 3 to 4 months thereabouts, and it is our anticipation that for the year 2018, and I should mention that we have special leave from the Ministry of Finance to operate a calendar year because the sporting industry is in fact a calendar industry, and we anticipate that by the end of 2018 we would have received somewhere between $595 and $605 million, which is a little more than we had anticipated based on what we had projected at the beginning of the year because of what we had calculated would have come in from the gaming industry.
All right. Sorry. Maybe for clarity.
Yes.
Maybe for clarity. There are two things that could add a lot of clarity. Number one, you have here at the end of the third quarter of the 2018 financial year, $64 million was spent on infrastructure projects.
Yes.
This amount is less than the budgeted amount of $206 million. Yes. So if we could get some idea, is this because of the problem with the consolidated fund, or if there's another thing? So you could, that's number one.
We can clarify.
And number two, maybe just to clarify this issue, certainly I would be interested, you must have there a list of the projects that you are doing that are not national projects, which would include, say, the basketball courts at stadium, etc.
Okay.
What are the projects being done in communities that are slated, that are being done now? I would be interested to know what that is now.
All right.
Yes.
The first question, just remember what the first question was.
You're down, your budget has...
the budget, the expenditure as against
$64 million
the budget.
From 206.
This has a lot to do, it has nothing to do with not having the funds available. Okay. It has to do with how you roll out the projects, and also the fact that I'm just informing the committee that also things will look a little bit different for the SDF sometimes because we do operate accrual accounting as against cash accounting. However, the nature of the projects, if we are doing a field, for example, the expenditure, the major expenditure will take time because a field can easily take you anywhere from 6 months to 2 years to complete, depending on the vagaries of the weather and that sort of thing. And so while in our budget we probably would have divided, if we say we are going to do a field on a particular time. We just divide and say, well, so much is going to be spent per month. But in real terms, you will have work being done for 3-4 months before you have a significant expenditure. And so that lag, which is apparent in terms of the numbers, has purely to do with how the projects are rolled out rather than funding availability.
So it's more due to the project implementation rather than
absolutely
fine.
Absolutely.
The projects.
To just indicate a number of what I would refer to as community projects. Woodstock housing scheme over in Portland. We are now
in Portland.
In Portland, sir.
Where's that?
Woodstock.
That's where. Where's Woodstock? Anata Bay.
Yeah, right. We are in the process of doing a field out there.
A field.
Yeah. Then we can mention.
These are the projects that you are funding.
Yes, sir. Yes. Based on what you have said, I am going through and picking out those in particular.
Absolutely.
And when I call this term, I don't want you to think anything, sir, because it's not really your parish. It's called the Westmoreland Oval. However, it's located in St. Mary.
St. Mary, yes, I know it very well.
Yes. We are doing field rehabilitation out there too, sir. And we are also building a fence for that particular facility. We moved to Ebony Vale out in St. Catherine.
But just remember, where's Westmoreland Oval?
Westmoreland Oval, just a little beyond Anata Bay.
Yeah.
It's on the main road, actually. You come off the junction and you turn Anata Bay is there, and just a little beyond Anata Bay, you run into Westmoreland Oval.
Absolutely. All right.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just remembering. I know it, but.
And that is SDF funded. We should have started already, but some projects you cannot begin when the rain is falling. The Ebony Vale, we have a field rehabilitation project that's there. It's ready to start, contracted and everything, but we have to wait until the rain stops falling. In fact, that also delayed the Alligator Pond project, of which the member mentioned. Then we are about to begin a project up in Maryland. There's a place up there that's named after the famous football field in Mexico, the Azteca playfield, and we are doing a lighting project for that particular facility. Then, well, this is a school, but it's a community project. The Tatius Golding High School, they have a field which they would like to upgrade, but in order for it to be upgraded, it has to get a retaining wall, major works. We have to be doing Gabion baskets and that sort of thing. That project is on the way. Tatius Golding High School, yes.
All right.
Right. That one, and that's a big one. We are slated to be out in Oracobeso, where we should be doing an upgraded field as well as change room facilities. This is near to that famous James Bond beach. That's another one that we are. So it's another community project, and I am only mentioning those that are actually being funded by the Sports Development Foundation, because we are doing others. The Spanish Town High School play field is significantly advanced at this particular point in time in terms of the field. It's in fact, we have it as practical completion, which is when just a few things are left to really complete it. We have done a bit of work, well, more than a bit of work. We have provided the Eltham High School with two multi-purpose courts.
That's in Spanish Town as well?
Yes, well, I suppose Eltham is part of the wider Spanish Town. Right? There's another project that is now, we can call it a national project, but it's not on the first. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go on.
What I'm actually mentioning is projects, just I can't help hearing, the projects that we are doing now. The San Diego High School, just to mention, has been the beneficiary of a complete field upgrade that was done under the HSSIIP program, and that was completed some time ago.
That's the that was the sugar transformation, right?
San Diego High School. And we did a number of other schools, including the Paul Bogle High School out in St. Thomas, including the Bogwalk High School, including the William Knibb High School.
Weren't those the high school program that was on?
Yes. I was
no,
just...
but that was, yeah.
Those were companies. Just that
no, but that's what I'm saying to you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. But you see, so these are, so the other projects are that you were just speaking about.
Yes, the ones I was listing are what projects that are ongoing now.
Right.
But because I heard
those two weren't. Those two, one would be prior and one is after.
St. Jago?
No, I'm just saying the two members of parliament had indicated they have a project.
The Farm Heights project is basically completed. The Alligator Pond is just starting.
That was within this. Within the budget.
Yes.
All right.
And we do joint. For example, we are about to start an upgrade of the field at the Balmaji Primary School. That's near Waterhouse, and that mention has been made of the CDF. There are times when we do joint funding. Just letting you know, the Balmaji playfield will be funded $2 million from the MP, and the rest of the $8 million is coming directly from the SDF, so that you have what we call the joint funding from time to time in terms of the various works that are done.
All right. And as I said,
Alligator Pond
to start.
Right. Alligator Pond is all SDF.
Right. So I think the question that all of us would like to know, because there's obviously a selection process that takes place.
Yes.
And certainly in another capacity as a member of parliament, I think in the last 2 years I've gone maybe 3 basketball courts.
Sorry, you have?
2. I've got a number of basketball courts, 2, and starting a 3rd.
Okay.
Not necessarily, but in discussions where we have, normally when the projects go, it is usually fully funded by SDF. Is it that, members of parliament, that there is scope for these requests to be made through SDF and there is funding available for these projects or for sports projects?
The simple answer, of course, is yes.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, in terms of application, the SDF website has a particular format. Anybody can go to the website, and the forms are there to be completed with all the details, which includes things like how it will impact the community, what level of involvement is there, because we now are insisting. It's always been like that from the time when you were chairman. For those who don't know, this is a past chairman of the Sports Development Foundation. It's always been a situation, but we are really sometimes do not insist on it. We do not have a remit to maintain facilities. No. And so when we are doing it in the communities, we want to be able to hand it over to a responsible set of people who will ensure that it is maintained to a certain level.
All right. So, and members, I think it's a good segue. And I just say to you why I've been trying to get this information and listening so keenly. As was pointed out, I chaired the SDF for 5 years. I was a founding chairman. I actually put together with Miles Fletcher and did the Articles of Association of the Sports Development Foundation. I purchased a building that they are housed at. Now, the issue is this, that during that period of time, there was a very clear policy, and I've been trying to figure out if the policy has changed. And I tell you, the policy was simple. We got funding, 60% went to infrastructure, 40% went to national associations. So we knew that 40% would be dealt with there. There was a little side that was taken out later to do with Institute of Sports, GC Foster, etc. But the 60%, we went out and we had made a policy that we were going to fix two major playfields in every single parish, so that given the importance of sports, we would have facilities across the island where persons would be able to go and actually have parish finals, different things. So we were working on that. Secondly, We went on a program in the first 3 years. We built over 100 multi-purpose courts across the island, all across the island. And the next step was to go in and try and light these courts, because what we wanted was an area where we'd have netball and basketball courts at night. Persons could go out, the families could go, watch their children, people play, the kids, help to create the communities. And so it was a process, and the large part of this, the concept that came with it, was a sports development foundation, knowing how strong sports is to Jamaica, that it would help to develop sports. So we were going to do these facilities across the island. What I was trying to elicit here is that we have a few projects. Certainly, even as a member of parliament, I made the point, I have not necessarily in the latter period been the beneficiary of it, so we want to see how that is. But I've been trying to elicit what is and what has happened to that vision. The first thing I notice is that we have this expenditure infrastructure is maybe about 30% now. The majority, 30 or 40%, of the total amount. So the philosophy has changed. There is the funding of the national associations, there are other things. So what I'm trying to get members is for us to have some clear picture of what your philosophy, if you don't know where you're going, you can take any road. And what I'm trying to do is to figure out what exactly is the philosophy that binds it. Because certainly, for example, Westmoreland, St. Catherine, St. James, it's not about getting a basketball court. It's the extent to which SDF is an important part of building the sports infrastructure of your country. So I think that in what we're doing, we need to keep a vision that the technocrats, those are in charge with the funding of our development of our different parts, sectors of government, that there is something that guides them. And that's what our job is, not picking the one. So I was just trying to figure out, and as always, I think that just from my perspective, in other words, when the original thought of SDF, the question that could be asked by somebody in Hanover or Trelawney or St. Mary, what is the philosophy that governs? What will happen to the infrastructure given the budgetary constraints? What's the plan going forward? I think that is where certainly I'm interested. And secondly, just in terms of the national organizations, question was asked by Mr. Stewart, it was sort of passed. We as a people, there are certain things that give us pride. So we have our national bodies getting something, but we're all proud of the fact that the Reggae Girls have done well and qualified. So obviously they're going to need funding. Government must be part of that. So we are all encouraged by it. So within your budget, yes, there's a budget for national associations, but there must be some thought as to how are we going to support them going forward. So I'm just saying that's a general concept that we want to stick on. What are our policy and how are we dealing with things in a general
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Could you cut your mic, please? Thank you. Your mic as well, Mr. Chairman.
That's okay.
Right. Now, I think it might be more useful if we asked questions of the different agencies, as opposed, and I don't say this to be disrespectful, but I find that sometimes when we speak, we do monologues, and we speak and we speak and we speak, and then there are now 10 different things within the statements that we make, and we don't really give the agencies a chance to understand or to even answer rather. So it might be more useful if we just one question, answer. So you had made the comment that the
it's a general philosophy is critical.
Right. But so it might just be important for us to just ask. So for example, if I were to ask Mr. Wills a question, because when Member Stewart spoke, it was within several things. So it's not that Mr. Wilkes did not answer the question or sidestepped it. It was just that too many things were coming at him at the same time. So the simple question, Mr. Wilkes, the Reggae Girls have been recently qualified for the World Cup in Paris for next year. I do recall that the ministry, through the SDF, gave $5 million immediately upon their arrival. And that was a very, very good thing. So in planning I don't know if you've met as yet to plan your next year 2019, to plan your 2019 budget. So within that budget and based on the discussion that you've been having, how much do you think you can allocate to the Reggae Girls, bearing in mind obviously it ought to be a partnership between private sector and the government, because we all share in the glory of the girls' success, which benefit to the glory of the nation. Can you give us some figures or some indication as to how you can come up to some figures? No doubt you'll have to meet with JFF as well.
Thank you, member. With specific regard to the Reggae Girls, you have mentioned the fact that we gave $5 million immediately, and we immediately entered into discussions with the Federation to get an indication as to what their needs are. And we are in the process of putting together our budget, and we are looking at them being able to receive from us in excess of $20 million as support going forward. The precise figure has not yet been finalized, but we are in discussions because we are looking at what they are able to get from other sources and all of that. I would like to also add to that we support football in a particular way on a regular basis, but we recognize that, as I had said before, when you have a World Cup coming up, and whether it's the male or the female, it's going to go up, and so we increase the amount that's available. And so yes, we are positioning ourselves to make sure that the Reggae Girls are supported to the extent that they need to be. I should also mention, just in terms of response, that we were able to respond to the unfortunate situation with Luton Shelton also,
absolutely,
which would have been totally unpredicted, you know?
No, absolutely.
All right, if I might continue,
hold
Mr. Chairman.
No. There was a general question about the philosophy
I can respond to that.
That deals with the development of sports.
Before I answer that precisely, you mentioned the 60-40. You should remember, Chairman, that 60-40 was the 60-40 of the total amount. It was 60-40 of the amount available for that kind. So in other words, if you have a 600 figure, it may be 400 or 450 that's available, and then of that, that's how the 60-40 would be. Fundamentally, the philosophy has not changed. What has happened over time is that the requests coming in are so numerous now that we are having difficulties in terms of how you allocate and that sort of thing. And in fact, the board and management have been discussing that possibly sometimes we go over too much to responding to requests rather than looking strategically and initiating. And in the cut and thrust of things, you get that happening sometimes. But fundamentally, the philosophy of emphasizing infrastructure has not changed. And what we have additionally done, which may change the numbers a little bit, is that we have said to the associations, when you are submitting your budget of requests, do not only confine it to your recurrent expenditure, but give us an indication of the kind of infrastructure development that you also may need. And so we now have associations which will come to us and say, look, we need a facility because, for example, rugby has come to us and said, listen, there's no rugby facility. They have to be using just the normal football fields. We need that, and we have to use that. So you may not see the figure sticking out just like in the past, 60-40, but philosophically, we have remained along that road.
Yeah, yes, and I have a question, but I think at the end of the day, though, what I'm getting at is that there is a overall plan. In other words, as we said, we had initially started with picking one major facility in each. No, one major facility in Cornwall, Middlesex, and Surrey, which were going to be the main, and then 2 in each parish, and then a number of courts, so that we were looking at building out a sports infrastructure. I'm just saying, I don't know if you have it now or if you can, but has the board really looked at it in that context, that you're saying to yourself, this is what we plan for the next 5 or 10 years, this is what this funding which has enabled us, what will we end up with?
Yeah, if I may respond to that, Chairman, the plan right now, and this plan involves board and minister in discussions.
Absolutely.
And there is a proposal to look at, and one would have heard the mention of what are called mini stadia. And it is along the same philosophy you're talking about in terms of centrally located facilities across the country in strategic areas so that it is serving the various population bases. I'll tell you the areas that have been looked at for the location of these, and I'm aware of, for example, Prison Oval, which was developed during your time, and a couple of others. But right now, in St. Anne, Draxall facility is being looked at as a central location, which is a multi-sports facility. That's what is contemplated for that particular location. Another facility being...
What I would say to you, because I know there are other members, what I'm saying to you, I don't necessarily want you to sort of pick out what I think would help us at some point is at some stage a vision. In other words, you're in charge of building out the infrastructure of sports for Jamaica. So the overall sort of plan.
Okay.
So I wouldn't really press you to give us that now, but certainly if in the next 2 or 3 months you can just send us an idea so that we can speak to persons and say, look, this program that went in, rather than sporadic things, is developing. Here's what's been done in this parish, that parish, in a coordinated and selected, organized approach.
Can I give you a snippet of the kind of vision, though, Chairman? We are, because so much has been done, the SDF is now approximately 23 years old. A lot of infrastructure has been built, and we will confess that some of those facilities have fallen into disrepair.
So you could start.
And so one needs every now and then to pause, do an audit of what exists, see what can be re-established, as well as what additional. And so that look is being taken.
But the point I'm making to you is that's what we want. If that's what you're going to do, just say to us, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to fix up those facilities. We're going to do this. Our audit shows that there are not enough facilities in St. Catherine or Trelawney or wherever. We're planning something there. So it's not sporadic. It's not just that who requests, but that there's an overall vision. I think what I'm picking up is a sort of a lack of that cohesive vision. That's all I'm asking.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I wasn't finished.
No, I have Member Paul.
Mr. Chairman, I was speaking to Mr. Wilkes when you indicated that you had a question about the policy you wanted him to answer, and I did not finish, sir.
Member Terlan, I had asked Mr. Wills had said something about this overall plan.
Right.
You had come in to offer clarification as to the question.
And before that, my hand was up, and I was speaking to Mr. Wills.
Member Paul had asked. We have time, but Member Paul had asked before.
You realize the discussion is very one-sided this morning. That's all.
Chairman, it's the first time I'm speaking today. Thank you very much.
I'm surprised.
Thank you very much. Chairman, I'd wanted to make a comment again, Mr. Wilkes, in terms of the overall program for the agency, and one of the comments was to do with the maintenance of the premises that have already been invested in. And probably at the start of each financial year, for the benefit of this committee, you could indicate to us what is the program and allocation for the various activities. I think that would enable us as representatives to know and to be able to make our own submissions to you. The question I want to ask is that I heard recently about works to be done at the 2 stadiums, one in Kingston and Trelawney. Are you involved with that?
Thank you, Member. The major works, well, I have heard some things too, that are scheduled for the National Stadium. That's not part of our budget. We, however, are continuously doing things at the National Stadium as part of our national project. And I'll tell you how we separate it. For example, we completed the netball court some time ago, and we are now in the process of upgrading the basketball facilities. And we have done, of course, the aquatic facilities, and we have a little left to do on that. The major works as far as the stadium area with the additional seating and all of that, that's not contemplated from the budget of the Sports Development Foundation, save and except what we provide to IPL on a regular basis. Where the tracks are concerned, we have taken on funding of the tracks over time. The Stadium East track is now due for significant renovation. It is my understanding that that will not fall under the responsibility of the Sports Development Foundation, but will be funded from elsewhere.
Okay, and finally, Chairman, I saw in your reports allocations made for legal expenses for representation of bobsled team. Could you just explain what's that about?
Okay. That just happened to be one of the athletes who fell afoul of the doping regulations. And it's along the same lines that we assisted with Carter and the rest of them. We seek to assist. And in fact, we have proactively entered into discussions with JADCO to see how we can minimize the number of times that we get into this, because we realize that it's significant expenditure, and if we can mitigate it, then it would benefit all of us.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wilkes, going back to the development of playing fields, what is your recommendation in regards to most of these playing fields which are earmarked for development and are not in close proximity to the watershed areas? No water harvesting is done in those areas, and also take into consideration our weather pattern.
If I may, Chairman, can I refer that question to my chief engineer, who is much more competent than I to deal with that one?
Use the mic for me, please.
That's a significant question, and we are also in thought about that. We are not absolutely sure how best to deal with that problem, but our reality has been that we have had to take into consideration trucking of water to these facilities. But over the years, we have found that the recipients find it difficult to maintain. And not just those, but generally speaking, we have found that the recipients are excited at the front end. Front end meaning at handover. When the projects are completed, everybody is happy. Even before the start of the project, sometimes the recipients show a sense of responsibility and willingness to maintain. So we're having not just the challenge of water, but also the challenge of the recipients not maintaining their fervor for what they receive. So my recommendation though is that the recipients be brought more up to speed with what it really means to have and handle and maintain a facility. We have done a lot of training in that regard. However, people tend to fall off. Most of our experience shows that there is usually a spearheader. There is usually one person who pulls everybody together, pulls the process of maintenance together. However, sometimes that one person moves on. And after moving on, you find that everybody below that person just is like an army without the leader. You kill the leader, you kill the general, and then the army is without direction. But God has been good to us because we have had some recent luck or blessings, with the weather, with the rain. Once a field is in though, and the grass is mature, we have found that even after looking next to bare, after a few good showers of rain, the grass comes back. I mentioned earlier about the maintenance and the management. Without management, even that will end up dead. There's the issue of weeds, not just the issue of drought, but the issue of weeds. Most of our managers don't understand what it means to have a weed eradication program. I went to a project recently which has a well. They have a well. Yet still the field is in poor condition. And you ask yourself, why? Is it that most of us are thinking that water is the only problem, but even when there is water sometimes, there is still a problem. And the problem is management. The mindset, the mentality of the administrators. I'm not sure if I answered the question.
Mr. Brown?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, so, and this will be for, I'll ask Mr. Wilkes, but certainly the permanent secretary and other persons here representing who deal directly with sports and the fields, etc., and development generally.
Very important.
Can you say, of the 63 members of parliament, can you say how many members of parliament have either written to you or sought to meet with you to discuss the development of play areas within their communities within the last year, 2018?
No, I wouldn't be able to say in terms of how many, but we are in communication with many of the members of parliament. But you forgive me, I really don't do a count. But we haven't received, it's not all of them that have put in requests, but quite a number have. And we have discussions at various levels and that sort of thing.
All right, excellent. Because why I ask is because given the importance of sports, in particular in terms of bringing unity, fostering peace, and sure, there are the exercise benefits as well. But from a community perspective, sports really help to develop communities. I think a proper sporting program is important to the development of every single community. What I want to ask from you is, have you highlighted, for example, communities in conflict? And do you have perhaps a list of communities in conflict and the benefit that a proper sporting program or assisting those community groups or community representatives, do you have something like that?
Yes, member. To answer, yes. We have been paying particular attention to the communities in conflict, and we do have an intervention program going. We have one, the Farm Heights was a response to that. We have one in the Western Kingston area. We have done significant work in the Denham Town area, in the Hannahtown area, and in Tivoli Gardens, where we have not only done facilities, but we have provided funding to assist with competitions. Basketball, for example, has been utilized as a means of intervention, and the Southern Conference Basketball League we don't normally fund things like that, but that was funded because that ran across a number of communities that were having challenges. And I can tell you, having attended one match down in what some of us know as back to, properly called Majestic Gardens, and the kind of turnout from the community and the support, it really bolstered us. It made us feel very good for that particular intervention. And so yes, we do target areas that are experiencing particular challenges as far as that is concerned.
All right, and perhaps this is a question for the permanent secretary. P.S. When you look at the contribution that sports can make and has made to our economy, sports really is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Do you think, perhaps you could give us an overall perspective? Do you think that perhaps the Ministry of Finance, do you think you need more budgeting, and do you think that an approach can be made to the Ministry of Finance so that so that between the ministry and the different sporting agencies, so that they get more funding when one considers the benefits of sports to the nation? When you look at sports tourism and again the income that comes from that, And also, when you look at the development of our national facilities, could you give us an overall picture? We're looking at facilities in St. James, facilities here in Kingston. How do we develop these facilities? Has any budget been? Have we derived any budget? Has anything been sent to perhaps infrastructure and development committee to look at for budgetary approvals? There has been much talk about renovating the stadium, etc. Can you give us, just a sort of overview as to the general policy and the way forward to ensure that Jamaica does in fact capitalize on some of these some of these international competitions and programs which would bring millions of dollars to the nation?
Thank you for that question. It actually gives me an opportunity to speak from a perspective as it relates to as you mentioned, the contribution of sport to national development. And from that perspective, the ministry has actually started a program to essentially identify how it is that sport contributes to national development. You ask about the Ministry of Finance. One of the challenges our colleagues from the Ministry of Finance has is that each year there's one pie, and all of the ministries put forward their arguments as to why it is that they should get a larger piece of that pie. One of the challenges with our portfolio, and sport is one of them, is being able to say, like some other ministries are able to say, that due to our contribution to national development, we should get a bigger piece, because the bigger the piece we get, it is more the contribution that we are able to make. So 2 weeks ago, we had our first forum on how it is that we are going to be able to quantify the contribution of sport to national development. And it's ironic that the question was phrased in that way, because it speaks to allowing me to speak to one of the main presenters at that forum. He is the director for sport for development and peace at the Commonwealth Secretariat. So in the Commonwealth Secretariat, they have a division that speaks to sport for development and peace. It means then that there's a recognition at that level, just as we have recognized here, that sport plays a bigger portion, plays a bigger role in development and peace than we actually are able to quantify. So when we go to the Ministry of Finance, while other people might be able to say, these are the number of tourists, for instance, that come in, and this is the dollar value that it brings, because we have the number of rooms to bed. That's the terminology you would know. Heads to beds is not rooms to beds, it's heads to beds. So what we are doing now is to utilize the assistance of the Commonwealth Secretariat, who have done this in other countries, for us to now quantify that. And we have started that process. Because then we would be able to go to the Ministry of Finance and indicate that, and I use some examples. One of the signal moments in sport for Jamaica was when the Reggae Boys, ironically, qualified for France. And all of us here will remember that one of the major news items following that was that the crime statistics for the day that we qualified indicated that there was no crime in Jamaica. How do we quantify the benefit of that? So if it is that sport has played a role in reducing crime, which we have indicated, for instance, is one of the reasons why it is difficult to get foreign direct investments into Jamaica. If we can start to quantify how building a field in certain communities can actually result in reducing crime, as well as sport in itself can assist people within communities. One, the field requires people to work in it, so you'll be able to help people to get jobs. Two, the development of sports, which is one of the main things that the Sports Development Foundation is for, if we are able to develop sports such that so we have a lot of success in track and field, we have a lot of success in football, well, probably not as much, would even mention cricket. But when we are able to develop other sports, so the chairman, Mr. Wilkes, spoke about gymnastics, he spoke about rugby. When we are able to develop other sports that will also now provide avenues for young people, not just young, but avenues for people to find alternative sources through which they can earn an income, then we are able to show how much it is that we, through sports, can actually continue to contribute to national development. But in order to do that, as has been indicated, we have to ensure that each year we are able to get that piece of the pie.
I think that's a positive thing. Historically, the problem you have, though, Member Terrelong, is when you go to the Minister of Finance, he points to the fact that there's already a dedicated fund for sports. So, but I think we're all on the same wavelength of the importance of sports. Right. I would ask one thing, though. We used to give, and you mentioned it, there was some funding that used to go to SDC and Institute of Sports. And the reason for that was that the thought was SDF, as a philosophical basis, would build these infrastructural things all across the country, and a number were built. Having done that, funding was given to SDC and InSport that was not to be used for hiring. It was really to be used for programs, so that now those programs of which you speak, you were able to generate the competitions, the inter-school, the inter-community, the corner leagues, that they would have funding. We had SDC here. They have told us they have almost no funds for programs at all. So I suspect that you have cut the funding to them. You still give them funding?
No, not at this time, sir.
All right. But you still give to Institute of Sports?
Certainly.
Is that for programs?
Yes, specifically to bolster their programs. And in fact, in addition to that, we when it comes to the summer, there's a particular assistance program for the summer for the youngsters and out of school that we also fund.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, perhaps as a committee, yes, Mr. Chairman, perhaps as a committee, we could make the recommendation or include within a report that perhaps the Ministry of Finance ought to consider, in light of the benefits derived from sports to the economy and to the social well-being of our communities, which lead to the social well-being of our nation as a whole, perhaps we could implore and press upon the Ministry of Finance the need to provide added funding to the Ministry of Sports to be disbursed to the different agencies, or the recommendation can be that with like SDC or other agencies we're
going to have a word with the Institute of Sport after, so maybe we'll get some clarity. I would say to you, though, member, I would say to you that I'm concerned. The programs are very important, and what you really want to see is some funding that deals with these programs in a sustained manner. One, and two, as I said, I'd really hope that if we knew, for example, in your parish, you're going to work on these 2 mini stadiums that they plan. So you know that you're going to now be able to utilize that for your parish things and so forth. And maybe they're going to build 3 or 4 courts. And then you'd get involved now to, especially if they're lighted, get involved to say which are the best ones. But I think what we need is to have the overall plan. But I believe that that is something that that infrastructural development, I think, is so critical. Because we do have, just looking around the country, it seems to me that it's an area that needs some additional focus. I would agree with you, but I would only agree with you in so much as we can get a very definitive program that it is focusing on, rather than just additional funding. And I think that's where your head is going at.
Yes, that's exactly where my head is going. I see the PS going. Before the PS speaks, and then there's also, you mentioned that Ms. Blackwood is a consultant as well. But I think it's important, Mr. Chairman. I have spoken with persons from different countries. And I mean, I'll rephrase it. There are countries in which sports is its own ministry simply because of the role that sports plays and simply because of the importance of sports to national development and also to the economy. So whilst we tend to focus a lot on agriculture and tourism, etc., but a big part of the picture, and Pierre spoke about the PI Ministry of Finance, a big part of the picture is sports and its importance because sports actually brings in this revenue. And Pierre also mentioned new sporting disciplines that would also attract more income and also enable more Jamaicans because Jamaicans are so talented. I mean, when you look at our swimmers, I mean, Ali Atkinson, she's the first black woman to have broken several different records and win a whole bunch of medals, etc. I mean, we now have persons, mixed martial arts. We have teams going out there. Recently, we have a bodybuilder who went to an international competition in Canada. I think it was in Montreal. And he won. This is an individual who works with civil aviation as well. So we do have these new sports and new sporting genres that do need the funding. But remember that if it is that X amount is only allocated to the ministry each year, then the ministry would not be able to help to fund these additional industries or burgeoning sporting disciplines. Perhaps if Ms. Blackwood could also explain to us, in terms of policies and directives and everything, what are some of the areas that she's consulting on with a view to showing the benefits and in particular the economic benefits of sporting disciplines as well?
Remember, I have no difficulty. I have PS. Let me just say this though. We have the JADCO. We have Institute of Sports. I don't know, that would be overly detained, but I would say to members, I know I have one question from Mr. Clark. You want a question on SDF as well? All right, because I'm going to just see if we can finish SDF so that we can move forward. All right, so what I have on the table, PS, you want to just say something? I'm going to ask you to be brief. You had wanted Ms. Blackwood, you want to? I'll give you 2 minutes just to speak on, I think, general policy. And then I would ask I would say to the members, if you have a question, maybe we could, Pierre say something, I just ask the members to just ask the questions because they could probably be wrapped up in the responses from Ms. Blackwood.
Right. So just to add some more substance to some things that were mentioned earlier. One, for instance, the question came about, and SDF, Mr. Wilkes spoke about the Stadium East, which they did not provide. Stadium East, the synthetic running track at Stadium East. And he indicated that they hadn't actually been called on to fund that. The Ministry of Finance actually assisted in providing the funding for that through, and it's coming in supplemental, and that work should start soon. The other quick point is as it relates to, where did I write it down? Oh, the question was, the comment was made earlier that each year, if we could provide the list of some of the programs that we are looking at, the infrastructure projects, etc. And I saw it as an opportunity to speak to what was just raised, that the committee is set up to assist in ensuring that whatever functions we are putting, whatever role we are trying to play, you see how you can assist us in doing that. And it points out to us that if we are able to show some of those projects that we are working on, then you can also assist at the time when it comes to budget to say your recognition of the importance of that to make the case for us.
I remember Terry Long. I think you made a point. That's I think a valid point. You made you mentioned earlier. It was done so well for us. And again, so it then begs the question, because I know that there has been a discussion about doing some work with the facilities that we have at the National Stadium. And the constant cry, which has been there for many years. It's not a new thing for similar type of swimming facilities in Western Jamaica, because when we see what can be achieved, the question is, if we put the infrastructure in place, how many more would we have? So your point is taken, but it is hard to even go to the Ministry of Finance or others without having a detailed overview of how we want to treat with those things, and figuring out what role is played by what is there.
One quick one before Mrs. Blackwood. The other point that was raised was the issue of the refurbishing of this National Stadium complex. You would have seen that the proposed cost for that is in the region of US $45 million, which already is way above what the SDF is able to provide. So that is something that we will have to be seeking.
In the next 10 years.
Right. It is something that we'll have to be seeking.
So these are issues that we
support.
have to. Ms. Blackwood,
no, not so long.
Hold on. Before I go,
we're seeking FDIs for
Member
that.
Clark, you had a specific question, Member Stewart, Member Clark? Yeah, Member Stewart?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a short question to Mr. Wilkes. I'm looking at here the Human Resource and Administration Division in a document here. I see where the planned target 2018-19 is 61 and the achievement is at 50. How are you coping with a short staff of, let's say, 11 persons?
Thank you very much for raising that, member. We have been short-staffed for some time. We operate with basically 11 overall administrative persons. We have a total staff of 40, but that 14 includes the caretaker and the bearer and that sort of thing. The Ministry of Finance, the relevant section that deals with staffing, came into the SDF, did their own research, and identified 4 vacancies. That has been now over 4 years. But because of the moratorium that was placed on appointments some time ago, we have been at them requesting for us. Critically, we have 4 project officers, including the chief engineer, covering the entire island, and it is extremely difficult for us. So we critically need this additional staff. We do have a difficulty as far as where we're going to put them because our building has gotten a little too small, but we have a program now for going upstairs a little bit and making sure the space is there.
Okay. Ms. Blackwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My intervention I consider critical at this point because we do have a national sport policy that covers all of the work of all the agencies that are here, the entities that are here, and beyond that. The national sports policy sets the framework for sport monitoring and implementation in Jamaica. And within that national sports policy, which is now at the midpoint, it's now 5 years old, and it's a policy with a duration or a tenure of 10 years. And so we are at this point, as was committed in the policy, to do an extensive review, and which we are doing. The sport is a very interesting area because it is cross-cutting, and that has been recognized in the National Development Plan. And it speaks to the contribution to brand Jamaica, the contribution to social and economic advancement in Jamaica. It speaks to all areas. It speaks to the issue of environment. And it speaks to, of course, the importance and the centrality of having the appropriate sport physical infrastructure. Now, one of the challenges with sport in Jamaica is that sport programs are not implemented solely, or in fact primarily, by the public sector, by government. Most of the programs are implemented by non-government organizations, by community groups, and there is a significant role that the private sector plays as well. A few years ago, trying to get a sense as to how much investment, financial investment is made in sport. If we were to look at the income and expenditure, that big book is income and the estimates of income and expenditure, and we look at all of the ministries, departments, agencies within government and their expenditure in the area of some kind of sport activity, we will see that on average well over $1 billion is spent in sport programs, whether recreational or performance, high performance, competitive, or primarily used as a means to mobilize communities to deal with issues of safety and security, issues of career advancement, and in other ways. But this is not necessarily considered sport, although in the policy these things are considered sport. Let's take Ministry of Health and Jamaica Move. Jamaica Move can become successful because there are facilities in place for these activities to take place. If we are looking at the security, safety and security aspect, if communities are having a football match, which is to bring disputing or conflicting groups together, it's the field, the football field has to be in place. If we are talking about non-communicable diseases and we are looking at having greater fitness and recreational aspect, if we are talking about even the fitness and recreation as an industry, you need to have the physical facilities. The government is the primary investor in terms of physical infrastructure. And so in terms of the vision that you are asking about, if there's a policy in terms of how SDF operates, you will find that within the national sport policy, there's provision for a general audit to be done of all of the sport facilities in Jamaica. That was done as a primary database to inform the policy when that was developed. The Sport Development Foundation, I would say that outside of major public investment programs, as PS mentioned about the National Stadium, that Sport Development Foundation, as it is now, the funds are not just a matter, as you heard, for sport physical infrastructure, but the SDF actually is a major financier of sport development in Jamaica. Unlike other areas where Chase speaks to culture, it speaks to health, it speaks to early childhood education. Most you have other ministries like Ministry of Health would have their budget and all of their other support, their agencies and entities. Yet there is a foundation that also provides other funding for communities. And it goes in the same case of education. But in the case of sport, there is no such opportunity. Within the Ministry of Sport, it consists of 5 persons. The Ministry of Sport, portfolio area in Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, there are 5 officers, and that include secretariat and administrative. Recently, I was added as a consultant in that area. That's the Ministry of Sport, in addition to the Institute of Sport, SDF, and IPL. And so you can imagine even doing the research that is necessary. In 2007, research was done looking at the contribution of sport to GDP and employment. We are now looking at doing that kind of study. So in my view, this is not necessarily the ministry's view. My view is that we really need a reorientation, a real look at sport as an industry, not just a matter of talking about it, but it's a major industry that can contribute significantly to the advancement of Jamaica in every way. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I think that we can fully agree with everything you have said. I think importantly, you have made the point about how government operates, but when you just made the point that you have the SDF, the Institute of Sports, we have the SDC, which does programs. I think there's a time for us, and you have IPL that manages the sports facilities. There's a time for us to have a rationalization of what the situation is. Could you just remind me, the Sports Council, that's the one, is it still chaired by the Prime Minister?
Yes, it's still chaired by the Prime Minister.
And it meets,
It has not met for the last 2 years.
Okay. It hasn't met, the Sports Council. All right. The thing is this, that, again, it is the body that would set the overall sort of global policy. You also made the point that a lot of these, whether it is security doing its community programs, and everybody is relying on the same infrastructure program that SDF really is in charge. I think it's important for us to recommend members to the Parliament that there has to be a coherent, structured infrastructure program that maybe take us over a period of time, 5-10 years. It needs to be developed at the senior level. That's where the Sports Council comes in, which deals with the funding, so that I could say, for example, I can say, well, look, in Westmoreland, this is going to be the major facility. These are the 3 or 4 satellite facilities. These are the courts. In other words, a structured programs that you know over a period of time. Similarly, with the various national sporting agencies, you're going to have to target some infrastructure and prioritize. So I think within the context that our recommendation should take it along those lines. Yeah, I'm going to just close now with
just one. There is a program there in terms of the ministry's strategic plan that speaks to just that. That does exist, and probably what is needed is for us to share that.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And point I'm making, if it is shared, I suspect it should be shared within the agencies. I suspect if they all have that. But the point I'm making is that it would have some specific guidelines as to what is being done. As a member of parliament or even chairing this committee, it's very hard for us to indicate whether you have been successful or not if we have no idea what it is that you are doing. And I think that in so much that there's no structured program, we can't determine whether you're following the program properly. So we're just asking if in the next 2 to 3 months, we will ask the Secretary to get back to us. Ms. Blackwood, yourself, I think that PS, but I think SDF as a funding agency has a critical role here, just in terms of how you're going to look over the next few years. What's your plan for infrastructure rollout? How you're going to tend to fund these? And similarly, you could probably do something with the programs, how you're expecting to do it, just so that we are comfortable that there is a structured program in place. All right, so members, with that, I'm going to now move on to the Institute of Sports. Time is on us, so we're trying to be as quick as possible. So, Institute of Sports, who is leading the charge here? Okay.
Good afternoon, sir. Renato Smith.
Pardon?
Renato Smith is the name.
Renato.
Acting Executive Director, Institute of Sports.
Okay.
I have with me today for support Mrs. Shirley McLean Brown, Director of Finance, and Mr. George Legister, Director, HR and Administration, Human Resource and Administration.
You could just give us a quick overview what you're doing and how it's going. You know, both your strengths and weaknesses. Just give us an idea of what's happening at the Institute of Sports.
Well, currently the Institute of Sport is in a transition mode, and we, at the same time, still implement the projects and programs of the Institute of Sports. We currently, recently completed our netball and football community development program, where we went around the island and in various communities, and we received some support, and it was very good for that program. Also, we are looking to launch a similar program, but only for the primary schools. So we will be around the island again with the primary school at this time. And then we, up in the year, since April, we have staged several programs. We staged the junior high school championships, the primary school championships, the basic school championships. And also we have a we like to call it the pre-Manning Cup season, the pre-season, where we stage a championship we call Challenge Cup for the high school persons in football. And also we do the netball as well. We also hosted in the summer students, and where we expose them to various sports. To name a few, football, netball, of course, basketball, chess, and for golf. We also exposed them to surfing, which I found very exciting. Basically, those are some programs that we
How much money do you have for programs on an annual?
We received, we have on budget to receive 107 million.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad.
Right, and 107 million.
And you're still receiving something from SDF, right?
Yes, we stand to receive somewhere about 20 million from
How much?
SDF. 20.
Not bad.
21 for this year. For programs as well.
Do you still do programs in association? Are any members of parliament working with you now, or have you found that there's an issue there?
If we do programs with associations?
No, with the members of parliament.
Well, we'd love the members of parliament to come back to InSports for their sporting programs, but at this time, unfortunately, they are not with us.
Yeah, well, for obvious reasons, I think we've had some
but we'd
issues
love them
in the
to
past.
come back though.
Is there any resolution of the issues that was there?
No, the matter is still being investigated.
Oh, it's still being, so
yes, that's
it's
my understanding.
still under investigation?
Yes, that's my understanding.
All right. Okay. Member Campbell?
I have a little concern. There seems to be, the number of agencies don't seem to be dovetailed into each other. It appears that IPL, and to a lesser extent, the other agencies represented here. SDC is not. Is the SDC?
No, they are in the local government.
But it's. I don't know what your view is, but how much do you spend on administration? How much you budget to spend on administration?
Well, I can tell you what we spent thus far this year, as of September. We spent approximately 68 million on administration. Right.
68 million to administer a budget. That's
our total budget is
271.
271.
Member Campbell, I think, in fairness, I think what happens with Institute of Sports is that they have a sports officer in each parish.
Yes, we do.
They have a sports officer in each parish, so that.
Right, and the question which I want to focus on is, the SDC has a similar program where they have sports officers.
No, not to my knowledge. The SDC, they have our community development officers.
Yeah, call them whatever you will. They pretty much do the same thing. And
well, my understanding is we have sports officers that are charged to assist with the development of communities via sports, and the SDC, if I understand correctly, should be developing like the community structure and so forth that the InSports should be using as a means of getting in the community and introducing sports, and how we can use sports to alleviate crime, violence, and to help them develop and introduce the whole administration of what the sports should be like, and the talents identification and development. That's my understanding.
All right. Perhaps we need to have a sit down.
Member, no, I'm fully in agreement with where you're going with your discussion. I think that, well, certainly I agree. You're for example, in my constituency, in a parish, if I'm putting on a community competition, a corner league, anything like that, I use either Institute of Sport or SDC. Now, in a lot of ways, similar sort of community organization. You'd have to explain to me the technical difference between maybe the Institute of Sports office has a little more sporting knowledge and the SDC a little more community. But I think the point that you're making is that from time to time there has to be a rationalization of how we are dealing with community development as a whole, whether it is and sports as an element to it. So I think your point is that where you're going with this?
That's where I'm going, and particularly
I think it would be invidious to ask
the
officer
in light of the millions which you see being allocated for administration, and I'm not sure whether or not we are getting the returns from that level of expenditure. You take, for instance, you move across and Mr. Wilkes will tell you that he spends another $50-odd million, and I don't know which portion of that is taken out for wages. I don't know how much of your $60-odd million is wages, and we have on the SDC, which has its officers. And somehow it appears to me that we need to pull the various agencies together and under one umbrella, and not have. I'm sure you will have HR personnel, you will have finance personnel, you will have the different people. Why can't it be just one HR person? Because we're pretty much having all these persons dealing with small staff, and Mr. Wills tells us that he has a staff of 14 or thereabout, and I'm sure he has.
You don't have any HR person.
Well, I don't want to warn you as to what the likely results of that could be.
Mr. Campbell, and I remember I was part of discussions when the Institute of Sports initially used to manage the facilities, and then IPL was formed to manage the National Stadium Complex, and I think a couple other. So that was another body. And at the time, it was a coherent, a strong argument. I think, though, from time to time, I think what you're getting at is, and it's not, I think it's invidious to ask the officers who have a personal interest. But what we should, and I think, do as a committee is indicate to Parliament and to the Minister that we would like to get an idea as part of that national sport policy, how in today you rationalize and create the efficiencies to properly manage sports. I think one of the difficulties we have is we end up sometimes spending a lot of money on administration, and then we have no money for programs. And then, you call the officers and they say to you, well, we'd like to do it, but we can't. So I think your point is a given point, yes.
Chairman, and I wouldn't want Mr. Smith to speak to that question either, but just to add to the discussion, and I think we need to put it into context, yes? The public sector transformation program is actively looking at just what we are speaking about here. So there is...
they're still alive?
Yes, rationalization of the...
I haven't heard...
They're
excellent.
And it's ironic. While we are here, I was receiving a call from them.
They might be watching.
No. that was long before we got to this part.
Yes.
But it is important also to put it into context, because we also spoke earlier about the Sports Council. I wouldn't want us to leave here with the wrong impression of the fact that it hasn't met. The Sports Council is also a part of the whole rationalization of the sports sector. So you will recall that previously there was plans were made, or there were proposals made for how it is that we are going to rationalize. So we are indicating that you have the InSport, we have the SDF, we have IPL,
Institute of Sport.
Institute, right. So the challenge was, how do we rationalize such that we are able to maximize the output with the small amount of that is made available to us. So even from the very perspective of the Sports Council, all of that is being reviewed, and it is ironic that we are, as Mrs. Blackwood indicated, at the midpoint as it relates to the sports policy, because while it is that is taking place, and you would also have heard Mr. Wilkes speak about the fact that there was a freeze on posts. It was precisely because there were plans afoot to...
Yeah, but that's been going on for some years. So I think what we're really asking for is just some sort of timeline.
So that is what I'm saying to you, that we are now at a point where the public sector transformation team has indicated that they are going to be looking specifically at the rationalization of the sports.
So within the next 3 months, as we had asked for this sort of overall policy,
we can provide that.
We can get that
and just to indicate as well, because again, I don't want us to leave with the wrong impression, that part of that rationalization is what would have meant we have to review the roles and functions of the National Sports Council, because that ties also into what we are doing in terms of making sure that we are operating all on the same page.
Mr. Thorpe, I think, having been a member for years of the National Sports Council, the National Sports Council was set up years. I think it was either, well, let's go back. I know that Mr. Manley and Mr. Patterson, I think, had. The fact of the matter is, it was a council which had the leadership of the sporting, not just organizations, but agencies charged with development that would meet with the Prime Minister once or twice a year, given the importance of sports to national development. So, and that the Prime Minister chaired it for that specific reason, just to ensure that this area that is so important to us gets that attention. Now, in whatever rationalization you do, I think that the concept is still a valid one to have. We heard Member Terry Long speak eloquently. The fact is, we all recognize the importance of sports. And so I think that it's important. We await the outcome of the deliberations.
Right.
But
so it's not that concept has changed. It's just that because of the rationalization, we have to look at it from a broader perspective.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, just if I may, before we close off on
Institute,
on InSport, I just wanted to make the point also that I hear Member Campbell's points, and I do agree that at intervals we ought to look at whatever the ministry is and whatever the agencies are, and I read recently, and I am aware that there is a restructuring process going on.
That's what the PS just pointed out, that
exactly, to cut down on double spending and all those
indicated things. He will give us something within 2 to 3 months.
Right, but InSport also, I'm aware, InSport also deals with sports up to the primary level. So including the primary schools. I'm not sure if that was mentioned when he spoke. I don't think I heard that.
No, and absolutely. And InSport has slightly different mandates to SDC, which has a slightly different mandate to so what we're really getting at is that there are different areas, but I think that without us getting into the details of it, I think that what Mr. Campbell said, and I agreed with him, there needs to be a rationalizing, and what Mr. Thorpe said is obviously the position also of the minister and the ministry, and so they're looking at it. So what we will get from them is, Mr. Thorpe, we don't need all the details at first, but certainly you'll give us the idea what you're doing with your rationalizing of these various departments and agencies which have wide mandates, and we can't really tell you what needs to be done here because we don't have all the information, but what your plans are. And secondly, just some concrete sort of ideas on the roll-up of infrastructure development, sort of on a national level, because we're all depending on SDF primarily to be the engine of that development. And to the extent that we have a plan, we can say, well, we know something or this is going to happen in a year or two, it will be very helpful to us.
And based on past discussions earlier, it would be appropriate for us to provide a copy of the sport policy for the committee. Naturally, when it is that the policy in most cases we refer to as the Bible, and if we all want to be singing from the same hymn book, the sports policy is important for the committee to have, so that they understand, for instance, the role of the SDF, the role of InSport, and also then we'll give you the rationalization plan.
Having said that, you are in charge and of whatever rationalization needs to take place. I think we would be more interested to see what the thoughts are coming out going forward.
And just finally, if I may just finally, because again, given the national importance of sports to Jamaica, Permanent Secretary, are you aware of the Prime Minister and the Minister meeting to discuss sports policy? Could you speak to the Prime Minister's involvement? I know I read recently the Prime Minister, he met with the Sunshine Girls, and made certain commitments to the Sunshine Girls as they played the series against England and Trinidad, and they went on to come second in the Fast 5 World Tournament recently. So certainly, just if you could indicate the Prime Minister's knowledge of these programs, meetings with the ministers, his approval of projects and everything, for example, the statues and all these wonderful things, if you could just indicate.
Well, I think it's important to point out that the rationalization plan is something that is approved by the Cabinet. Of course, the Prime Minister is head of the Cabinet. And as
also, I thought you said that you were in the process of doing the rationalization. I didn't know it had been approved.
But remember that public sector transformation and rationalization doesn't just speak to sports, it's an overall plan.
Yeah, exactly. Right. No, but I thought we're talking about sports.
Right, and so whatever the elements are coming out of that public sector transformation and rationalization would have been approved by the Cabinet, and the Prime Minister would have led those discussions. So, but in terms of specifics now, in terms of sports, and the member Terlang spoke about, well, I still have to call him Minister Terlang, spoke about the Prime Minister's involvement in sport. He spoke about, for instance, our recent we recently unveiled this statue for Shelley and Fraser Price, and I think even the Prime Minister, I think jokingly indicated that we are now the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, Sport, and Statues at that function, because it is part of a thrust to ensure that our athletes are,
and cultural icons.
And cultural icons, yes, because we also unveiled the statue earlier for Miss Lou. And you see now why it is that the statue thing comes up. But the Prime Minister plays an integral role in that. So while it is that the Council, it was said earlier, has not met, the work of the Council is still being carried out. Because
also the council hasn't met. But the council is really just to give strategic guidance.
Right. So the strategic guidance is still coming from the head of the council through meetings, not necessarily with the full body of the council, but with the relevant stakeholders. And the head of the council does play an integral role in sport. So if, as Minister mentioned as well, he would have met, for instance, with the Sunshine Girls prior to their departure for Fast Five. I don't want to say that it is because of his involvement why they came second, but definitely he continues to play a key role as the head of the Sports Council in all of the developments that take place while we do the rationalization of the council itself. Because there is still a strategic role that the council plays, and the head of the council, the Prime Minister himself, does.
In fact, I could just add as well that even as it relates to Luton Shelton, the minute it was discovered that Luton was in fact ill, I am aware of discussions. Minister Grange was on the phone speaking to the Prime Minister, seeking approval for the $5 million that was given to Luton Shelton. And again, that would have been a decision in concert with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister would have been well aware of and approved and everything else.
No, by no means. Members, I don't think there's any discussion that, the Prime Minister and the Minister and all are not involved in the issues that are taking place. I think the more fundamental issue is that there was a strategic planning role that the Sports Council should take. So the extent to which it is or not meeting is critical, and I think that you said you're doing a rationalization. Let's see how it is. But quite frankly, I do believe that we need to have a strategic plan going forward. I think there are some things, different elements of it here. Let's see if we can pull it together, if we can get the information and disseminate it.
And we'll provide that
differently. So let's move forward. I'm going to move now to Jadko.
Afternoon, Chairman and members. I am June Spence Jarrett. I'm the Executive Director of JADCO, and I have with me my Manager of Finance and Accounts, that's Mr. Delgado Smith, and I also have my Technical Director, Mrs. Nadia Vassar, and also with me is my Director of Communication and Education, Mrs. Vanessa Reed-Ledford, as well as my Director of Human Resource Management and Administration, Ms. Deborah Warren.
Well, Ms. Spencer, I think what we really want is that over the last couple of years, there's been a sort of tightening up and restructuring of JADCO, and it has a very important role. A small country like ours that does so phenomenally well at sports, we have to ensure that the sort of sporting infrastructure we have in place is the best, and with that is the anti-doping, and the fact that we are able to have that at a certain level allows us to put aside any criticism that may be cast about our performance, being other than the natural talents of Jamaicans that they've shown over these many years. So you have a critical role in ensuring that. So I think our job here at the PAC is just to, I heard you're new to the post, ensure that your programs are on the way, that you're comfortable everything is being done, that you have the funding required to ensure that everything that is necessary is being done, so that we can have nothing, no aspersions cast on us. So I think it gives you the platform just to say to us where you're at and how you are. Give the sort of time constraints, because...
Well, as you understand, Chair, that whenever you go into a new organization, you need to do an audit of whatever exists. And that's what we have been doing with the team, and I have a very supportive team. And we have been looking at our education programs, and we are rebranding. We are taking the education to the athletes. Sometimes we are having our workshops. The attendance is not as good as it should be. So what we are doing now is taking it to them, and we are looking at that. We are moving into schools. We're having the JADCO school tour, where we see a school each April. This year, April next year, we will be in St. Elizabeth. And we have just concluded our workshops, our junior athlete workshops, and we have done it in 4 regions, and we are now looking towards our senior athlete workshop, and we have seen, and this is for young athletes and their support personnel, and we have seen over 1,000 persons in these workshops. And we are now looking, we have our education program, and we are taking it to television and radio. That has been done. We are evaluating the program, and we are now looking to add some other things to the program by, the wrapping of the buses to see where we can send a message across to even not those urban but rural Jamaica. And it has been going fairly well. We have our doping control program, and so far, if I tell you, we have set a target of 500 urine tests and 100 blood tests. And so far, we have done 150 urine tests out of competition, 116 urine tests in competition, which makes it a total of 270. We have so far done 43 blood tests out of competition and 39 blood tests in competition, making a total of 82. So we are well on our way. We have also looked at a database to take care of, we can easily run queries and history. That has been established and it is rolled out, and we are taking it forward. We are looking at our organizational structure to put in some strength in the organizational structure, and also to put in some internal controls. We have our budget. Our budget is 100, I tell you, for the year, 147 million. We are staying on course. It might look a little small, but we have to stay on course and make it work for us.
I would have 2 questions. One,
yes, sir.
What you have said, that program, I'm happy to hear it. I think what we would like to know is, one, this program, is it cutting edge? Is it everything that is required? Because you see different countries having issues and people come and, oh, your program not up to scratch and you can't participate, etc. Are we, given the position we have in sports, are we on the cutting edge? Do you have everything that we can speak with pride to our anti-doping program? And secondly, I'm very interested in what you said about the education program. One, even at the sort of professional athletes, and I saw some interaction with the education, even at that level. Because you have all these power drinks and all these things, and then people are taking certain medications. Every now and then you hear persons indicate that, well, the product, or there was a problem with the product and we didn't know. Is it that we're disseminating that information even to the professional athletes on a timely manner, so them get their full list and everything, so that across the board, so that information is there with them? And secondly, we're performing very well, and unfortunately we have to also protect the younger persons. We do very well, even high school coming up. I'm very happy that you have that program, but do you also work with all the trainers and others and everyone involved? Are we getting at that level and really pushing the education campaign even at the early stages, just to prevent anything going forward?
We have not gone into the primary school level, but we are
not primary, sorry, secondary.
We are at the secondary school level.
Sorry, no, I didn't.
And we are not.
If I said primary, but I really meant secondary, where I was really kind of more focusing on sort of going through the,
Our
that level.
Junior athlete workshops are geared towards the secondary school students. The senior athlete is for the professional athletes.
Yes.
Now we also, as I mentioned, the JADCA school tour where we're going. In addition to that, we have requests from schools to come in. We are now embarking on a parent-teachers meeting where JADCA's representative will make presentation. Our first presentation will be at Jamaica College. So we are trying to get into there. We have our courtesy calls that we are now embarking on with all the federations and clubs and associations, where we meet with them, they say their problems, we put forward, and we are working with them. At our workshops, We have the updated prohibited list that is circulated. We have brochures. We prepare a package for each athlete, and each athlete have all those things in the package. So ignorance is no excuse. So because as a result of that, we have the information fed to
So
them.
you're saying that the education program is intensive.
It is intensive.
At what age and level do you actually start any testing? I suspect you're already professional, but at what level do you start?
Once they compete in sports, but for minors, we have to get consent from the parents for us to test them.
But you do test minors?
We do test once we get the consent from the parents.
Okay.
They have to send a consent.
And that's a structured program as well?
It's a structured program.
And in other words, you have a system by which you deal with that?
Yes.
All right. And in terms of it being cutting edge, are we, there was a time when even the Olympic Association, there were some discussions about our programs and so forth. Are we now clear and among the best in the world where our testing programs are?
Yes, and we want to maintain that brand, Chairman, because we are brand Jamaica. So we must clean it up before it gets elsewhere. So this is why we are embarking on a vigorous education program so athletes know their rights and responsibilities.
Okay.
You speak. Yes.
Sorry, I'm sorry about
this. Yes. You speak to the issue of varying numbers of blood tests and urine tests. What method do you use to induce the how, when, and where you take these samples?
Well, we don't tell the athletes, we don't tell them that we are going to test them. But when it is done randomly, and we must identify and notify, and that is done. And we take them into areas that, according to the water rules, that it must be a certain standard. We try to observe that at all times.
So it's random all the time?
Random.
Okay.
So you don't know who is going to be tested.
Ours is strictly national. Do we get any oversight, or do we have any international sort of
we have to be water compliant.
So every now and then, I remember they sent a team some time ago.
And they check on, yes.
All right, and then they say, so you send your programs and they're
and they send to us and we respond to them.
I remember hearing the cost of some of these tests. They're extremely expensive, aren't they?
They are.
Do we send them? I think we're sending them to Canada.
Canada, yes.
So we still
do them because that's the accredited lab.
And of course, it's far too expensive. I mean, you think, I don't know, the university, you take these different, is it at some point that they would set up a lab to do these tests, or is it that you are more comfortable overseas, or is it just too expensive to set it up? What's the thought behind that? Because
there's no accredited lab in Jamaica.
No, I realize that, but is it something that would be thought of, or it's just not, economies of scale don't make sense?
That would have to be discussed.
At the National Sports Council.
Policy issue, so that would have to be discussed otherwise.
Yeah, but as I said, yeah.
So,
but it's quite, I remember it being quite expensive.
But then we have to do it.
All right, for my part, Mr. Chairman, personally, I want to say a very big thank you to Ms. Jarrett and the entire team at JADCO. I do know that JADCO has done consultations with Ms. Blackwood as well. And I want to say a very big thank you on behalf of Jamaica for the work that you have done in terms of sticking to your vision statement, in terms of sticking to your mandate to ensure that we have a dope-free sporting environment in Jamaica. I have seen the campaign that you have done, I believe, with Dr. Mario Guthrie as well. The campaign had great impact, just teaching the children about, the ill effects of doping and just to play fair. Because part of the message about sports is fostering an environment that is all-inclusive, that does not discriminate and allow persons to play, but to play fairly. And I also, Mr. Chairman, must say a very big thank you to our athletes. Our athletes continue to represent Jamaica with much pride. They continue to make brand Jamaica what it is. And the part of making brand Jamaica what it is to ensure that they comply with the WADA regulations, that they comply with JADCO's regulations, to ensure that when they represent us on the international stage, that they are dope-free, that they are tested, whether it's A sample or B sample, that they come back negative. And so for the large part, our athletes continue to do us proud. And I see we have a fresh crop of young athletes coming up as well, and they are very impressive, and they continue to make us proud. Kudos to JADCO, the team, and also to the athletes, the coaching staff, etc., for making sure that we can, wherever we go, proudly wear our brand Jamaica, simply because they have been compliant with these rules as well as to anti-doping and keeping Jamaica and the sports in Jamaica dope-free.
Absolutely. Mr. Tarlang, I enjoy myself. I think we all agree with you. I was really sitting here protecting you because in speaking not to the budget, I was afraid that Mr. Clark would have given a point of order, but I'm happy he didn't jump in at that point. But nonetheless, I would have protected you. But I think we all enjoying ourselves to those comments. Is that true?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a short question to Mrs. Spence-Jarrett. I was wondering whether or not it would be it's in your remit for you to meet with some of those manufacturers and some of those persons who import these energy drinks, because we see them at our sports meet and being sold. Is it part of your remit to sort of offer guidance as relates to these things getting into the schools, getting on the market from time to time?
Well, we circulate the prohibited list, which shows up what drug is the athlete should not take, and then we have these Jamaica Medical Doctors Association, and we also send them to other doctors. But we have not really met with any of the companies that deal with the sport drinks. We have not.
I'm agreeing. I think what I'm getting at is, with all of that, one of the things I think may be useful, I don't know if you do it, these things can either be sold publicly or privately. Yes. So you might go into a pharmacy or something and you see a whole array of energy drinks, and for people who are in serious training, you might decide that energy, like Mr. Whittam might decide he wants some energy drink to help him with his intense training program. Yeah. So but the problem is, where that is concerned, should there not be some labeling in the where those things are imported, and we see them there, whether there could be some arrangement, I don't know, with the consumer, what they call it, Community Affairs Commission. If we can have something so that, because what would be unfortunate is, as you say, you may have young athletes and somebody say, boy, this one is a good one. If there can be some, or if there is some labeling of these products, that you would have that element. I don't think you can do it where people are actually bringing in stuff. That's a whole different dimension. But certainly on the over-the-counter, it is very, it's a horrible thing where somebody go into a pharmacy, see something over the counter, take it, and then you do a random testing, and they say, well, I didn't know, and then it becomes what we do, these education programs. I'm wondering if we need to go just that step further and just come together as a government in something as important as this and label those things that do come in, which may have some warning attached to them.
Yes. In fact, Mr. Chairman, there was a meeting recently with Ms. Blackwood, and part of the discussion, for her to speak, but part of the discussion surrounds ingredients, because water. So in other words, there's a list of approved substances and bad substances, and what actually sends that list. And so one of the things that we're doing now is ensuring that manufacturers, that they actually have the list, that they know what is prohibited, and also that for the labeling that is done so that everybody knows exactly the full content of these products. I know Ms. Blackwood is doing some work in that regard. Perhaps you could just expound as it relates to the labeling, etc.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The supplement industry worldwide is unregulated, and because these substances are not just for athletes, it's for everyone. But there is a list every year. The World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA, puts out a list of what they would consider banned substances for athletes. And JADCO has opportunity to have that, and JADCO uses that, put it in a very sort of athlete-friendly form, and that information as part of their public education program is shared with all stakeholders, and that's one of the areas in terms of their public education that they continue to reinforce. Plus, that information is on their website, and they use the social media in many ways. In addition to that, though, sir, is that what the ministry has embarked on is we are now looking at having what we called a national compliance committee based on the UNESCO convention, where we will work with manufacturers, distributors, persons in the health sector, persons in the security areas that deals with not only like the energy drink and others, but also in terms of some illicit drugs and other areas, to see how we can, the customs, how we can work together to make sure that we are on the same page, that that information is shared. And so that is one way of protecting our athletes, to ensure that they are not exposed to this sort of thing. And there have been research also done through JADCO and the universities in terms of the energy drink, but there is an important part of the public education program. The labeling may not be such, because these energy drinks are not just for athletes, they are for whoever it is that choose, but the information is provided.
I think we are agreeing, all that is good. I think the point I was made, and I don't know the legal ramifications, some of those supplements, etc., because of what they contain, if you do testing, you may find that you may get a positive. The problem is that with your education program, many should, or all should, see this. I'm just making the point that when I go and see X on the shelf and it sounds good as a supplement, and I see it over the counter, I just feel that there's no problem with it. I think just to protect even those who are not athletes, but would be concerned that this is something that they would not want. Is there something, and I don't know the legality of all these things, but something that, just like how you have a smoker label, you can put something that this would get a positive test or something. I don't know how it is. I don't even think it's something that just Jamaica should be doing. I think the World Anti-Doping Association should be looking at it as well, because too many people come in with these things. But I don't know. I was only putting it out there, and we can take it.
Right. Well, the thing is, from a legal perspective, every single athlete is responsible for whatever they put into their bodies. So when you look at the water rules, the water regulations, when you look at all the cases that have gone to the Court of Arbitration for Sports, everywhere, exactly. So it is that personal responsibility. And so one of the things that legally, what we try to encourage athletes to do is to stay away from all these substances, all these supplements. You know what I mean? So we try to get athletes to stick to healthy diets. So even something as going to get some fast food, we encourage them, listen, once you're in training, things like the fast food, because there are the negative health benefits for that and everything, but the supplements and all these energy drinks, we generally encourage athletes to stay away from them because of different things that they can contain, things that might be hidden from the labeling as well. Because at the end of the day, it is your personal responsibility. So part of the education program that Ms. Jarrett and Ms. Blackwood have spoken about, that JADCO actually does, and that as a country, as a government, that we try to do, is to encourage athletes just stay away. These are listed bad substances. However, even with your medication, make sure your doctor understands, make sure your doctor gets the list of the bad substances, because you can get a painkiller that contains something that you ought not to take, or a derivative of something you ought not to take, whether it's in, so even for medicine as well. So it's not just about nutritional supplements or these, high performing energy drinks, but even the medication that they take whilst they're in training as well.
All right, members?
Just in addition to that, sir, you spoke about the cutting edge. I just want to mention too that our doping control officers, they are invited to international events. We had 2 that went to Pyeongchang. They went to Olympic Games where they performed duties. The Bahamas Youth Games and also the Pan Am Games. And they are also asking us, we have done so far 30 contracted tests from other countries, including Bahamas, who have asked us to conduct doping control because of the quality that we offer.
Excellent.
And,
which is where I wanted to go to. I think
yes,
it's an area at which,
yes,
the thought
sir.
was we would become the regional experts on this.
And we want to fulfill our vision, which is to become the premier world-class anti-doping organization, and we are getting there.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Chairman.
Members, if there are no further questions, I want to thank the Permanent Secretary and the team from the Ministry with specific responsibility for sports. I think we've had a very informative day today. There are some additional information for us in in 2 or 3 months. We look forward to that. Thank you for coming. Thanks the members, and thank the members of staff and our representative from the Ministry of Finance. So members, with that, we're adjourned till next week, Wednesday.
Thank you, Chairman.
We live in a digital environment.